The ruler snapped against Patricia's palm with a sharp crack that made me flinch. Not because I was intimidated by this 60-something HOA president in her immaculate tennis outfit, but because I knew what was coming next. "Mr. Parker, this is your third notice regarding your lawn maintenance," Patricia said, ruler in hand, measuring a blade of grass with the precision of a bomb technician. Section 7, Paragraph 4 of the Oakwood Estates HOA Guidelines clearly states that no residential lawn may exceed 2¼ inches in height. I stared at her, then at the ruler, then back at her perfectly coiffed silver hair. "You measured my grass? With a ruler? Don't you have, I don't know, literally anything else to do with your time?" Patricia smiled that thin-lipped smile that made me want to scream into the void. "Property values, Mr. Parker. They're everyone's concern. You have 48 hours to remedy this situation, or we'll be forced to issue a fine." As she clip-clopped away in her tennis shoes, I looked down at the violation notice. $300. For grass. That's when something inside me snapped. If they wanted a well-maintained yard, I'd give them a yard they'd never forget. I'd moved to Oakwood Estates 6 months ago, after finalizing my divorce from Elaine. 15 years of marriage dissolved in a 30-minute court hearing, and a signature on dotted lines. She got the downtown condo, I got the savings account, and a crushing sense of starting over at 38. "The suburbs will be peaceful," my realtor had said. "Oakwood Estates is very well maintained." Well maintained was realtor speak for soulless conformity enforced by clipboard-wielding retirees with nothing better to do than measure your grass and catalog your existence in violation notices. I'd received my first HOA letter 3 days after moving in. Apparently, my mailbox was non-regulation burgundy instead of the approved cranberry red. I wish I was making this up. "You've got to pick your battles with Patricia," my neighbor Frank told me over the fence as I repainted my mailbox. Frank was in his 50s, with a perpetual look of mild worry, like a man who'd spent his life waiting for the other shoe to drop. "She's been HOA president for 12 years running. Nobody runs against her anymore." "Why not?" I asked, trying to tell the difference between cranberry and burgundy, and failing miserably. Last guy who did found his trash cans mysteriously relocated to his driveway every morning at 5 a.m. for 6 months. Could never prove it was her. I laughed. Frank didn't. The grass violation was the last straw. I'd been a rule follower my entire life. Got good grades, went to a reasonable college, took a practical job in software development, married my college girlfriend. Look where that had gotten me. Single, living in a beige house identical to 27 others on my street, being harassed about grass height. My nephew Milo was staying with me that weekend. My sister dropped him off every other Saturday, claiming it was good for him to have male influence, but really using me as free childcare while she took spa days. I didn't mind. Milo was 12, obsessed with dinosaurs, and one of the few people whose company I genuinely enjoyed. "Uncle Dan, I need help with my science project," Milo said, dumping a stack of library books on my kitchen table. "We're studying prehistoric plants, and I need to make a diorama." I flipped through one of the books, pausing at a page showing ancient ferns and cycads. Something tickled at the back of my brain. "These plants still exist today, right?" "Yeah, they're called living fossils. Plants that haven't changed much in millions of years." I stared at the page, an idea forming. "And they grow in this climate?" "Some do. Mr. Wu at the garden center helped me pick some for my project," Milo said, oblivious to the gears turning in my head. I looked at the HOA violation notice still on my counter, then back at the prehistoric plants. If Patricia was so concerned about my overgrown yard, I'd transform it into a prehistoric garden that was technically within HOA regulations, After all, there was nothing in the bylaws that specified what kind of plants were allowed, just how tall they could be. "Milo," I said, "how would you like to help your uncle with a special project?" 3 days later, I met Gary Wilkins in my driveway. He'd been recommended by a co-worker as the most creative landscaper in the county, which I took to mean willing to do weird stuff without asking too many questions. Gary looked like what would happen if Bob Ross and a grizzly bear had a baby. Wild hair, wilder beard, and hands that seemed permanently stained with soil. "You want to turn your front yard into what now?" Gary asked, scratching his beard that was more bird's nest than facial hair. "A prehistoric landscape," I said, showing him my sketches. "Ferns, cycads, ginkgos, all plants that existed when dinosaurs roamed the earth." Gary's eyes lit up. "This is the most interesting job I've had since I built that underground bunker for the guy who thinks aliens are stealing his mail." He paused. "You're not doing this to mess with someone, are you?" I showed him the HOA violation notices I'd taped to my refrigerator. "Let's just say I'm engaging in some creative compliance." Gary broke into a wide grin. "Oh, buddy, we're going to get along just fine." The transformation began the following Monday. I took the week off work, claiming a mental health break, which wasn't entirely untrue. There's something therapeutic about ripping out a perfectly normal lawn and replacing it with plants that dinosaurs once munched on. By Wednesday, my yard was starting to look like a scene from The Lost World. Tall ferns, cycads with their palm-like fronds, and ancient-looking ginkgo trees created a prehistoric landscape that still, technically, fell within the HOA height restrictions. Patricia appeared at precisely 10:17 a.m. on Thursday, ruler in hand. "Mr. Parker, what exactly are you doing to your yard?" "Landscaping, Patricia. Just as you requested." I gestured to a worker carefully trimming a fern. "These are all living plants, well-maintained and under the height restrictions." I handed her a document. "Here's a printout from the HOA guidelines. I've highlighted the relevant sections about appropriate landscaping. Nothing in there bans prehistoric plants." She snatched the paper from my hand. "This isn't over." But it was just beginning. The following weekend, I took Milo to a closing museum sale I'd found online. The Natural History Museum 2 counties over was updating their dinosaur exhibit, selling off older displays to make room for new technology. "Uncle Dan, are we really buying dinosaur statues for your yard?" Milo asked, vibrating with excitement as we walked through rows of prehistoric replicas. "Just small ones," I said, though I was already eyeing a juvenile triceratops that would look perfect among the cycads. "We have to be strategic." A woman in khakis with a name tag reading Dr. Zoe Chen, Paleobotany, approached us. "You seem interested in our specimens. Are you collectors?" "He's turning his front yard into a prehistoric garden to annoy his HOA," Milo blurted before I could respond. I winced, but Dr. Chen laughed. "You're creating a prehistoric garden in a suburban HOA community?" She examined the small raptor statue I was holding. "That's either brilliant or insane." "Why not both?" I replied. She laughed again, and it was the first genuine laugh I'd heard in months. "You know, with the right plant selection, this could actually be educational. A little piece of the Mesozoic era right here in... Where was it?" "Oakwood Estates," I supplied. "Educational," I repeated, brain whirring. "That's exactly what I'm going for. Pure education." By the end of our conversation, not only had I purchased 5 dinosaur statues of varying sizes, but I'd also secured Dr. Chen's, "Call Me Zoe," business card, and a promise to consult on making my yard scientifically accurate. The dinosaur statues went in over the next week. Gary helped me position them strategically among the plants. A small pack of velociraptors lurking beneath a grove of cycads, a stegosaurus partially hidden by ferns, a baby T-Rex peeking out from behind a ginkgo tree. The neighborhood kids noticed first. I'd come home from my actual job to find small groups of children staring into my yard, pointing and chattering excitedly. Their parents were less enthusiastic, but had no grounds for complaint. There was, after all, nothing in the HOA guidelines about dinosaur statues as lawn ornaments. Patricia tried anyway. She appeared on my doorstep with a revised copy of the guidelines, a section about tasteful lawn ornamentation, highlighted in angry yellow. Garden gnomes, tasteful bird baths, and appropriate seasonal decorations, she read aloud. Nowhere does it mention prehistoric reptile replicas. Dinosaurs weren't reptiles, Patricia, I corrected. They were their own distinct class of animals, many of which were actually ancestors of modern birds. And these are educational models, not decorations. She looked like she might snap her clipboard in half. This is not over, Mr. Parker. I was starting to enjoy hearing that. My prehistoric garden was getting attention beyond the neighborhood. A local paper ran a small feature called Jurassic Yard, complete with photos of kids examining the dinosaur statues. I started a blog documenting the garden's development, which gained a modest following of paleontology enthusiasts and anti-HOA activists, a surprisingly passionate group. Zoe became a regular visitor, helping me label plants with scientific information and correct positioning of the dinosaur models. Our professional relationship was evolving into something more, though neither of us had put a name to it yet. You know what this garden really needs? Zoe said one evening as we sat on my porch, drinking wine and watching the sunset cast long shadows through the prehistoric foliage. What's that, Dr. Chen? Movement, she said, her eyes twinkling. These plants and statues are great, but dinosaurs weren't stationary. That's when she told me about a bankruptcy auction for a traveling dinosaur exhibit, including several animatronic dinosaurs. You're not serious, I said, though my heart was already racing at the possibility. Completely serious. My colleague is handling the liquidation. They've got a T-Rex, Triceratops, and Velociraptor that still work perfectly. She sipped her wine. Just think of the educational value. I was thinking more about Patricia's face when she saw a moving T-Rex in my front yard, but I nodded solemnly. Education, absolutely. The animatronics engineer, a lean man named Trevor with oil-stained fingernails, walked me around the warehouse where the dinosaurs were stored. These babies were state-of-the-art when they were made, Trevor told me, patting the T-Rex's leg. Motion sensors, realistic sounds, weather-resistant. The company went under because the tour manager embezzled all their money, not because of the product. I circled the massive dinosaur. And you're sure it can be installed in a residential area? Technically, yes. Legally? That's between you and your local zoning department. He winked. But I can tell you these are classified as temporary structures, so most residential codes don't have specific prohibitions. Temporary, I repeated. As in, existed only for 165 million years or so. He laughed. I like you. I'll throw in the Velociraptor for half price. I made the purchase on the spot, arranging for delivery later that week. Then I called Gary. I need your help with something that might get us both arrested. There was a pause. Is it dinosaur-related? How did you know? Because you've got that tone in your voice. The one that says, I'm about to escalate this situation dramatically. He wasn't wrong. The installation had to happen overnight. Trevor brought a small crew, and Gary handled the electrical work. By dawn, 3 animatronic dinosaurs stood among the prehistoric plants in my front yard. A T-Rex near the driveway, its head moving periodically as if scanning for prey. A Triceratops by the mailbox, its horns positioned defensively. And a Velociraptor near the walkway, programmed to lunge slightly when motion sensors detected someone approaching. I'd programmed them to remain quiet between 9 p.m. and 8 a.m. to comply with noise ordinances. During the day, however, they would periodically emit realistic roars and calls, with special emphasis during scheduled HOA meeting times. Frank was the first neighbor to see them. He was leaving for work when the T-Rex turned its head and let out a low growl. The coffee mug he was holding shattered on his driveway. "Jesus Christ!" he yelped, jumping back. I waved from my porch. "Morning, Frank. Meet the new neighbors." He stared, mouth open, then suddenly burst out laughing. "She's going to have an aneurysm," he said, wiping his eyes. "God, I wish I could see her face." He got his wish about 20 minutes later when Patricia's silver BMW rounded the corner. The T-Rex, sensing movement, turned and roared. Patricia swerved, nearly hitting a fire hydrant, then slammed on her brakes. She sat in her car for a full minute, staring at my yard. Then she pulled out her phone and began furiously dialing. By noon, half the neighborhood had driven by my house. By evening, there were small crowds gathering on the sidewalk. Milo, who had conveniently convinced his mother he needed to stay with me that week for science homework, appointed himself tour guide. The Tyrannosaurus Rex could bite with a force of 12,800 pounds, he informed a group of wide-eyed kids. That's strong enough to crush a car. Parents shot me nervous looks. I gave them reassuring smiles in return. "It's all educational," I told them. "Just trying to inspire the next generation of scientists." The emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. the following evening. Coincidentally, I'd programmed the dinosaurs for a synchronized roaring session at 7:15 p.m. The community center was packed like I'd never seen before, every chair filled, people standing along the walls. Patricia stood at the podium, trembling with barely contained rage. "This is absolutely unacceptable!" she shouted over the distant roar of the T-Rex. "Mr. Parker has turned our respectable community into a theme park." "Actually," I interjected, "it's an educational exhibit, and I've reviewed the HOA bylaws extensively. There's nothing that prohibits educational exhibits, dinosaur statues, or automated lawn decorations." "They're not statues, they move, they roar." Patricia was practically foaming at the mouth. Frank, to my surprise, stood up. "My kids love it. They've learned more about dinosaurs in the past week than they did all last year in science class." Other parents murmured in agreement. "Property values," Patricia sputtered. "Think of the property values." "Funny you should mention that," I said, pulling out my phone. "I've had 2 real estate agents contact me this week. Apparently, houses on Dinosaur Street are generating unprecedented interest. One agent said we could see a 10% increase in valuation." The room went silent. In Oakwood Estates, nothing trumped property values. "Be that as it may," Patricia recovered, "there are safety concerns, noise complaints. These creatures are a distraction to drivers." "I've had the entire installation inspected and certified safe," I countered, "and they're programmed to be silent during evening hours, in compliance with noise ordinances." The HOA board seemed split. The vote to ban prehistoric recreations was tabled pending further investigation. Round 1 to the dinosaurs. Patricia's campaign against my prehistoric yard intensified over the following weeks. She called the city zoning department, who found no violations, reported me to the electrical inspector, who complimented Gary's work, and called the police so many times that Officer Jenkins and I were now on a first-name basis. "Mr. Parker, we've received another noise complaint," Officer Jenkins said, standing in my driveway for the 3rd time that week. He looked tired and increasingly amused. "Let me guess, Patricia Holloway?" "You know I can't reveal who made the complaint." He sighed, glancing at the Triceratops. "Though I will say my son has been begging me to drive by your house every day after school. The dinosaurs are all programmed to be silent between 9 p.m. and 8 a.m., I explained, showing him the control app on my tablet. Well within noise ordinance guidelines." Officer Jenkins nodded. I figured as much. Look, between you and me, there's nothing illegal going on here. Unusual, yes, but not illegal. He lowered his voice. My daughter's birthday is next month. Any chance we could schedule a private viewing? By the end of the month, my yard had become something of a local attraction. Zoe had helped me add informational plaques, and teachers from the local elementary school were bringing classes for field trips. I'd taken to working from my front porch, enjoying the surprised looks on visitors' faces when the dinosaurs moved or roared. Even some of my neighbors had come around. Frank had asked Gary for the name of the nursery where we'd sourced the prehistoric plants, and a few brave souls had added small dinosaur statues to their own gardens. Patricia, however, remained undeterred, and she finally found her technicality. The cease and desist letter arrived by certified mail. Patricia had paid for a private survey that showed my T-Rex was exactly 3.7 inches taller than allowed structures in front yards. The fine was astronomical, $500 per day until the violation was remedied. I sat on my porch staring at the letter, genuinely deflated for the first time since this all began. Milo found me there, clutching the paper. "What's wrong, Uncle Dan?" I showed him the letter, explaining the height restriction in terms he could understand. "But we can't get rid of Rexy," Milo said, eyes wide with dismay. "He's the best part." "I know, buddy," I sighed, "but I don't see a way around this one." Milo studied the T-Rex thoughtfully. "Uncle Dan, why don't you just make the dinosaurs kneel?" "What do you mean?" "Well, the T-Rex is too tall when it's standing up straight, but what if it was leaning down, like it's about to eat something? It would be way cooler and shorter." I stared at my nephew in awe. "Milo, you're a genius." One call to Trevor later, and we had a plan. The modifications would cost a bit, but nothing compared to the daily fines or the satisfaction of watching Patricia's next move fail. The HOA vote was scheduled for the following Saturday. I spent the week working with Trevor and Gary to modify all 3 dinosaurs into more dynamic, lower-height poses. The T-Rex now leaned forward in a hunting posture, the Triceratops lowered its head as if charging, and the Velociraptor crouched as if ready to pounce. Not only did they now comply with height restrictions, but they looked far more realistic and intimidating. The community center was standing room only again. I'd prepared an impassioned speech about joy, education, and community spirit, ready to make my final stand for the dinosaurs. Patricia tapped the microphone. "Before we vote on the new regulation, I'd like to share some concerning information. The Parker Prehistoric Exhibit, as it's now being called, had over 300 visitors last weekend alone. 300 strangers walking through our exclusive community." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Our peaceful neighborhood is being turned into a tourist attraction," she continued. "Is that what we want?" As I stood to respond, the community center doors burst open. A woman in a business suit strode in, followed by a camera crew. "Sorry I'm late," she announced. "I'm Jennifer Walsh from the Chamber of Commerce. We've been monitoring the growing popularity of Mr. Parker's exhibit, and I'm pleased to announce that the City Council has voted unanimously to include Oakwood Estate's Prehistoric Garden in the annual Heritage Tour." The room erupted in confused chatter. "This means," Jennifer continued over the noise, "a significant tax break for the community, funding for road improvements, and of course, a substantial increase in property values." Patricia's face went through a fascinating range of emotions, finally settling on a tight smile. "Well, that changes things somewhat." Within an hour, the vote had been changed from banning the exhibit to officially endorsing it. Patricia, ever the politician, was already discussing with Jennifer how she'd fostered this unique community engagement opportunity. I caught Frank's eye across the room. He raised an imaginary glass in my direction, grinning broadly. 6 months later, my prehistoric yard had become the centerpiece of what the local tourism board was calling the Dinosaur District of Oakwood Estates. Several neighbors had added their own prehistoric elements, though none quite as dramatic as my animatronic trio. Gary's landscaping business was booming, with a new specialty in unique botanical installations. Zoe had received a grant to document the educational impact of accessible prehistoric exhibits, using my yard as her primary case study. And yes, we were officially dating. Even Patricia had come around, in her own way. I still caught her measuring things occasionally, but she'd developed a strange affection for the Triceratops, which she called Patty. She'd bring neighborhood visitors to see it, explaining the historical significance of the Cretaceous period with surprising accuracy. "Uncle Dan?" Milo asked one afternoon as we positioned a new baby Stegosaurus next to its mother. "Do you think we could add a volcano next?" I laughed and ruffled his hair. "One extinction-level event at a time, buddy." Across the street, I spotted Patricia watching us. When our eyes met, she gave me a curt nod before turning away, her ruler still clutched in her hand. But I swear I saw the corner of her mouth twitch upward. Sometimes the best way to build community isn't by following all the rules. It's by creating something so outrageous that people can't help but come together, even if it's initially just to complain. My yard may be prehistoric, but the connections it's created are anything but extinct. And the grass? It never exceeds 2¼ inches. I made sure of it.